Hello, everybody. Can everybody hear me? Yes, I think we're good to go. We're going to begin. We're going to go ahead and start. My name is Lauren Brands, and I am the Outreach Coordinator here at the Laureate Eating Disorder Program. Before we jump into what we're all here for, which is to see the webinar on Stand and Play, I'm going to go over a couple of housekeeping stuff. Okay, there we go. First of all, we're going to do a COVID-19 update, which we just hope everybody right now is safe and healthy. Know that our thoughts are with you. I'm going to go back, sorry. Laureate is a part of Oklahoma's largest and most trusted health system, so we do have state-of-the-art medical care, comprehensive and multidisciplinary command center. We're dedicated to infection control department, internal COVID screening we have available as well, and in-house lab services. I know you guys can see that, but I just wanted to go over that briefly, and that we are accepting new admissions at that time. So that's some of our updates for COVID. Who we are, so Laureate is a very individualized eating disorder program. We have outpatient and inpatient services. 80% of our patients and families do come from out of state. Sorry, these are going fast. We have a 1 to 3 therapist to patient ratio, and we do accommodate patients of all cultural and religious backgrounds. We do have all levels of care: acute, residential, partial, Magnolia House, which is our independent living for adults that finish the adult program, and our outpatient care, which is available to boys and men. A couple of you have asked me about certificates and certificates of completion for CEU credit, which I know you all probably want, and will be emailed to you this afternoon. Some of our upcoming events, we have 3 webinars coming up in May, 2 in May, 2 in April, 1 in May, and it's going to be Gracie and Roseanne, which is, Gracie is one of our adolescent therapists, and Roseanne is one of our adult therapists. Roseanne's is the one that's coming up first, and she'll be talking about seeking safety. So the links to join in there will be able to send out, we'll be sending them out in the CEU certificates that we send. So if you're interested in joining us, we would love to have you. Feel free to sign up there. So now we're going to jump into Dr. Meyers-Ellett presentation webinar on Stand and Play. It is such an honor to introduce a great friend of mine and a mentor. So without further ado, this is Dr. Meyers-Ellett.
Hello.
I'm going to pull out your PowerPoint. You're welcome. Let me just pull out her PowerPoint really quick, and then we'll start it right away. Okay, we're going to just start this here. Sorry, we're going to just... Here we go.
Alrighty. Can we move this real quick?
Yeah, of course.
Oh. Okay. Well, thank you guys for all showing up. I guess this is my first webinar virtual experience, so bear with me, and I hope that you guys will find this as informative and helpful as possible, because this is something I'm really passionate about. I am a registered play therapist, and although we only treat adolescents here, we do see kids sometimes as young as 11, and so just know that some of these interventions may work for a wide range of kiddos, but here we mostly see teenage, adolescents, and I'll also talk about how we can modify some of the play interventions so that way we can apply them to older groups as well. How do I move forward? Okay, so a brief overview, just the things that we're going to be talking about today. I'll go over, so why play? Why would play therapy be helpful for this population? Why is play therapy used for children and adolescents, and then how we can make it helpful for our adolescent, or for our eating disorder population. I have a couple suggestions for toys and miniatures that you guys can use, and know when we're talking about play therapy interventions, I am a registered play therapist, so I would caution going full out play therapy intervention unless you have training. So I'll give you guys some links if you are interested in going that route in your practice, but we can talk about just some ways that you can implement just more toys and sand expressive interventions without being necessarily licensed. I will go over sand tray and play therapy, or sand play, and that's something that I really, really love using. You can also use it with adults. It's a really great intervention, and that's another one I would recommend just having more training, CEUs. There's also a sand play therapy, I believe, like a license or certification if you want to explore that. It's based in Jungian practices. So that's just some helpful information for that. I'll also go over body image. Briefly, I'll go over art process. I'm not going to spend a lot of time there because I feel like that could be its own webinar, really. There's so many art interventions, but I will touch on how we can use expressive interventions and maybe some prompts or things that you can use with your clients. And then I'll give a few resources, some books that I really recommend, and hopefully we can open it to some Q&A. Okay, so why play therapy? If anybody has ever, if you've been a kid, you have kids, you're around kids, you know that play is kind of their whole world. It's a universal language. And so what play researchers have found is that it really helps children use their instinctual desire for exploration. It helps them gain mastery of their environment. So it really is a tool for learning. So what we've seen across the decades is kind of the reduction of play. They're cutting recess short. They thought it was just like, oh, they're just having fun and not learning. So there's a really big push in the play world to show that, yeah, they really do need play. This is how they learn and connect. And so there's Dr. Gary Landreth is a name that I would remember. He's kind of the father of client-centered or child-centered play therapy. So a quote from him is basically that play is children's language and toys are their words. So if you can kind of conceptualize like why would this be important, just knowing that this is how they communicate, it's through play. So if you're in practice and working with a kiddo and you're just trying to use words and you're trying to talk and stay really cognitive, maybe you're talking from your level and not really meeting them where they're at, which would be in the language of play. And just more play research, it can promote creative thinking, encourage healthy relationships. I would say that would be really important, say if you're doing group work, and especially in eating disorders, when you're working in groups and learning how they can interact with one another, touching on issues of like comparisons and interpersonal relationships. So play can just be another avenue to explore that further. And it can just be cathartic. So when kiddos get to play, they get to release strong emotions, whether it's anxiety, it's joy, fear, all kinds of things. So, and another thing I would say on play, this might be more relevant to like say our population here, is that as they move into adolescence, their style of play changes. So we are, instead of looking at it as like play is this all or nothing thing, like play is recess, it's the playground, it's toys. We're going to really look at it as it just changes its form. So as they become older, maybe they're going to want to journal, play a musical instrument, they're going to collage, paint, some of those really expressive techniques that we see, but I would still categorize it, you're playing. So here is an example of just some products that you can have on hand in your office when you're working with children and adolescents with eating disorders. Let's see if my cursor will work. So here on the left, I think this is part of just like a basic play therapy in your toolbox. What you would have would be like food and groceries. And so I think it's probably pretty obvious why you would want to use this. Let's say if you're working with a younger kiddo with an eating disorder, they can really just use those, and you can work through whether they're nonverbal or if they are verbal. You can practice, having food exposures, or maybe see if there's like anxiety or fear that comes up, if they're really avoidant of using these toys. I think all of that could be a really great indicator of if something's going on, and allowing the child to play through some of their own issues and fears around food. And especially with, I would say this one on the left with younger kiddos, like 6, 7, that's probably going to be the basis of your work with them. Is just having those on hand. And now the other ones on the right. So right here, I actually have this set on the top, which you can find it on Amazon, and it's called the Eating Disorder Miniature Set. And as you can see, there's a scale, a mirror, a toilet, pills, and then food. So we'll get more into the use for sand tray and using that in a bit, but really just having a representation. Some people in their play work kind of want more abstract, but I think when you think about working with younger kids, they're really concrete. And even if you have an adolescent and they appear maybe 15, 16, emotionally, cognitively, they may be still stuck in that concrete thinking. So just having things just like this, where there's a toilet, like how do we work with that? What does that represent for you? And then the one underneath is, I think it's a dollhouse, like a gym set. The dollhouse miniatures can be really helpful if you can't find specific things like an elliptical. There are some websites for like play therapy toys, and I know at the play therapy conferences they would give or sell a lot of little products like that. Like I have an elliptical and a stationary bike in my office, like the miniature version. So, and that can be really useful. So let's talk about sand tray therapy. I do have, these are actual pictures from sessions that I've had that I have permission from my patients to use for this presentation. And then I'll go over some examples further so you can kind of make sense of what's going on there. So sand tray therapy, the founder of sand tray is Margaret Lowenfield. This has been around since 1939. So really the purpose was to help those who are lacking verbal and emotional ability to express their thoughts and feelings. So she was really like, how do we connect in the therapeutic world if somebody's not able to recognize, or say, hey, this is what I'm feeling. And that comes often with kids, like they don't know what they're experiencing. So how do we give them the tool to be able to express that age appropriately? And so the process with sand tray really comes through the selection, thought, and placement of miniatures. So what I showed you on the slide before with the little dollhouse miniatures, or like the little food, you can use that in sand. So your client gets to go and choose the miniatures, talk about their problem in the sand, and really do a lot of problem solving and process by using the toys available. And then sand tray also is really helpful to gain an alternative perspective. Let's say, I wouldn't say sand tray is just you can't just use sand tray, right? So we're talking in some sessions. Let's say if we're getting stuck, I have a resistant client, someone who's really not in touch with their emotions or having a hard time expressing themselves, then that would probably be a time when I would bring in sand tray as just like to get out of their comfort zone. Like, okay, let's just try something different. And then I think it also helps give them a break too if we're really feeling stuck in the process. And now sand play therapy is a little bit different, kind of based on your theoretical orientation. So Dorokoff developed Jungian sand play. This really, it just taps into more of like your unconscious. Let's say if a toy or miniature stands out to you, they would say that was part of the process. Like maybe I can't verbally or consciously recognize that this is what I need to work on, but it just kind of came to me while I'm engaging in a sand play session. And something I do use often with sand play is the whirl technique. I think it's a really good starting point for most people that are working with sand tray, where they can just create, what does your world look like? Show me what feelings go with that? Like, what does your world look like with your eating disorder? How does it look in your family? So you can really modify that. But I think it's a really great jumping off point. Another thing about sand play is it really helps the client who's working resolve conflicts. They can solve problems where maybe they don't really feel like they have the power to do that in their day-to-day. Like, this problem's way too big, there's no way I could manage it. But if they've got kind of this view of a world in a tray, it really removes them from it, and then they're able to problem solve and move things around and we talk about gaining a different perspective. But then that could just be another method for them to really work on some issues that maybe they weren't able to verbally process. And then I have, they begin to understand the connection between the world they create in their sand and then their own inner world. So what they create in the sand is just another reflection of what goes on in their own world. It's really great. There's certain techniques where you can, if you have the means for it, you can turn your tray and kind of look at it from different angles, and really, say if you want to bring in family to a session, having family be able to view it as an outside observer, and just say like, wow, this is really what goes on in their head. This is how they view their world and what they're processing. So some sand tray interventions. I've got some prompts. There's some really great resources online with just standard prompts that can be used when you do use sand tray. But these are tailored to more eating disorder and some what I would use in session. So just examples. So create a tray showing how you believe others see you in your body. And there's a couple of ways to go about this. If you have people as miniatures, or if you just want them using abstract items, you can do either, or you can just give them full freedom and just say, using anything in the room, how would you depict yourself in relation to other people? And then show me what life in your eating disorder looks like in the sand. I'll go over one of those trays here in just a second where someone did that. And then kind of like that before and after when we talk about problem solving, this one, so make a tray that represents your relationship with your body now and the relationship you want to have with your body. So that could be either two separate trays, or you could split the tray down the middle and kind of have them side by side. And so sometimes that's really helpful for them to really just look and see, oh, wow, this is how distorted I am, or this is how miserable I am with my body now, and this is what I hope to have. And then we have the world tray, which I talked about just a second ago. Just, show me your world. What does it look like now with your eating disorder, or, what it looks like without it? And sometimes that can be really difficult for someone who's been living in their eating disorder and their illness for a long time, and it doesn't feel real. So we can kind of also talk about like what's a more realistic version. So say maybe still having some pieces of your eating disorder in your life, and like if you're struggling, what does that look like in your world as well? And then create a picture of your life, or in family therapy. So you can do this just with the individual, or if you do want to bring in family, I would say maybe practice first with your client by themselves in preparation for adding family members to your sessions. So create a tray showing how your eating disorder has impacted your family relationships is an example of a prompt. Let's say if you do bring in, if it's a child or adolescent, working with family, as we know, is crucial. So I think maybe one of the first steps would be just showing, how do you feel, in recovery? How do you feel in your eating disorder? What are you currently struggling with? And then having the parent be like a quiet observer for a bit, and then maybe bringing them in, and you can do all kinds of interactive things or even the parent can do a sand tray, and then the client or patient can be the observer, and then it really gives some more content and things to work on. So here is an example of a sand tray that I did with someone. So this right here was an example of, I believe, like the world tray, but it was like the world with your eating disorder. So using anything in the room can you show me what your life looks like now and what it looks like with your eating disorder? So if you see my cursor here, this gal, this was her. And then, like I said, I have the eating disorder from Amazon sand tray miniatures. So the mirror comes in there. And this side reflected recovery for her. So she had her spirituality, she had her future, she wanted to work with animals, she wanted children, she wanted to be comfortable with difficult foods. So you can see like a cake and a hot dog. These would be her friends. And so for her, this was what recovery means. But then when she looked in the mirror and had these struggles with body image, then all of this presented, right? So this was a reflection of what it was like to have her eating disorder. So again, here's an example of one of those little miniatures for exercise. And for her, this was really, she talked about this being like really just temptation, and it's moving really quickly. That was her use of the cars. So as you can see, maybe I would never imagine like I need to use cars to depict my illness, but for her, I think it was a really great representation, and she was able to use all kinds of figures. So that's why miniatures are so important, to have like a wide variety and not just what we would think people might use. And then she has a scale here and a boat, and then the coffin, which we definitely attended to because she knew it was dangerous, it was life-threatening, and so on. So this is, we spent some time on that first tray, and then we came to this one, and I had given her the prompt of, so make another tray, you can take anything out or add anything that you want to this current tray that we had, the one before, but representing you, how you want it to be, like whether that's in recovery or whether that's how you want to have, what kind of relationship you want with your eating disorder. So for this girl, she went ahead and, as you can see, moved everything, but it's like over here in the corner. So for her, it wasn't the absence of eating disorder. So it was like, okay, I will struggle, I'll still have thoughts, but they'll be further away and they won't be just all coming at her at the same time. And then she moved him over here on the side, just kind of, she described it as taunting, and then again recovery, and everybody was still here. But that was a really good process for her to just say, hey, I'm going to still struggle, I'm still going to have thoughts, but I'd like them to not be as loud, and this feel more present to my current everyday. So let's shift over to the use of sand and play with body image. So there's many ways to implement expressive interventions in body image. I obviously prefer it that way, but all kinds of things you can use in individual and group settings. So what we know about body image is we're going to really help our clients learn skills so they can recognize the thoughts and the feelings and beliefs about themselves that kind of lead to the negative body image, which in turn leads to behaviors. We're going to also work in body image on challenging negative messages and assumptions, just really identifying, like, where did I get these beliefs? How long have I had them? What influences still contribute to my negative body image? And then the emphasis on a neutral response to body before body positive. So while body positive is this wonderful movement, it can be really hard to believe in it or to get there when you're in such a negative space. So we spent a lot of time on, okay, let's just get to a neutral place before we move on to positive. Here's another example from a real intervention that I use that I'll talk about in just a second. But in the article that kind of went with this webinar, I talked about the body image party and the string activity. A lot of these resources are readily available and just workbooks, Google. We've got some body image like group activities workbooks, and these can be really helpful. I would say string activity would probably be the most beneficial. You would do that one-on-one with the therapist and challenging distortions. having them cut a string where they believe certain measurements around their body, what they think they would be, and then you'd go and make actual measurements and then process it. So to me, anything that's tangible, experiential, using your body, using more than just traditional talk therapy would be a form of play and a form of expressive intervention. And journal prompts, as we talked about earlier, how children transition into adolescence, they do a ton of writing. So I think that's something that they're really comfortable with. Like they go to school every day, and they've been doing homework for a long time. They've probably journaled before. So this is something that would be really familiar to them that I think you just why not just keep it going through the therapy process? So having journal prompts that are really specific to body image can be really helpful. Some group stuff that I do, the around the room affirmations, where they write their name on like a construction paper, and I have them write at least 3 affirmations or positives about themselves, and then we just pass it around the room as many times as we can get around, to get to everybody, where other people can give compliments or give positive character traits, things that they like about that person, and then it's something for them to keep. And if you remember, even just as being a little kid, you would always bring your little macaroni necklace or whatever you made it at home, and you made it at school and you'd bring it home, and it's something just to cherish and keep. So I really like having activities where they can just keep it and hold on to it and reference back to it later. So I think the letter, I'll skip over the guided imagery because that goes with this picture, but the letter to and from your body, I think is a really common one in eating disorders, just being able to process, how I feel about my body, and getting some closure if they're trying to transition into being comfortable within weight range now, and letting go of certain things from maybe their eating disorder body and how it looked. And then also with the advertisement collage, I would say you can do any kind of collage, which for me, I like the advertisement collage. We'll go in a group setting and find maybe triggering or not helpful or unhelpful messages that come in society about body image, and we can create an alternative to the advertisement or write a letter to the agency. Those kinds of things can really help with healing and identifying where am I getting these messages, and what do I do when I see them in the future? So let's come back to the guided imagery with art prompt. So I'll give you guys an example of what was done here. I feel like if you want to make your own script, that would be awesome. But there are some resources online. This one was about your body being a prison. I think there was about like a 5-minute relaxation in the beginning, and then I just read through a whole prompt, imagining yourself in your body, and your body's a prison. What does it look like? What does it sound? What are the sounds? What does it smell like? So really accessing all of your senses, and then it kind of transitions into, so what would it be like to escape this prison? And then just again, accessing all of those senses where, okay, then I would get out, and this is how I would get out. These are the steps I would take. Who's there? What do I see? What do I feel? And so this guided imagery, it takes a while. I think that's at least 20 minutes to get through that part. And then the next part is just like the art process of it. So create it. Show me, what did you see? What did you feel? What stood out to you in that guided imagery? And so, for example, this client who did this activity, she was very, very new in treatment. So for her process looked a lot different than some of her peers who had a different, like the key to her breakout of prison. So for this gal, her idea of it, which wherever they are is fine. It's all great information, a great place to work with. But for her, this was her prison, was in her body. These were the negative messages. And it's pretty, shows like where she was at the time, was this to her was the key. So to get out of that, to escape it, she thought, well, I have to weigh a certain amount, I have to restrict, I have to look a certain way, and that will make me feel better. And I think that's really common theme that we see all the time is, oh, I feel like this, so I need to do all of these things in order to escape. But the difference, which I wish I had an example for you guys to see, but the difference for maybe someone who had been in treatment longer or was a little bit more recovery focused was their eating disorder prison was pretty similar, but their key or their escape was more like, my family's there, school's there, my goals, my future. These are the things that are really going to get me out of this, and I'll be able to escape. So we'll talk about art process. And like I said, I won't spend too much time on that. I feel like this would be an awesome, its own webinar. And I will say that I'm not an art therapist, so this is not like diagnostic. We're not interpreting art, but this is just how do we implement the creative activities and artistic mediums to guide play and expressive techniques with kiddos and teenagers. So what we know about art is that it helps kids and teens tap into their creativity. It's a different form of communication. So if you want to look at it like with play, how we said that play is its own language, right? Art would be just another language. It's another avenue to get where we want to get. So just challenging the notion that like the only way someone can communicate and process would be through words. I think just using these different mediums is really great. And it also said it's non-threatening, gives them a sense of control. And I would say another caveat to this would be, for some people, it's extremely threatening. It makes them feel extremely out of control. So you can use it either way. For some people, it's a release and they feel great about it. And then especially in this population, I think you would find that a lot of people with eating disorders find this really difficult. So I'm challenging perfectionism. I'm judging myself. This isn't good enough. I'm going to rip it up and start over. Maybe they feel like this is too vulnerable, or I don't know what to do, I'm not doing it right. So even if you don't quite make it to the prompt or what even you're supposed to be doing, I think, like I said, it's great information and you can just work with it and say, hey, talk to me about what's going on for you right now, what you're struggling with and what feelings are coming up as you're trying to create this project or whatever you're working on. And there's a lot of different techniques that people can use. You could do activities with their non-dominant hand, so it'll look bad anyways. And you can kind of evoke some of these responses on their own. And then, so basically the goal of having art process is for them to have another avenue so they can process their feelings. Hope is to reduce stress and anxiety. I know I just talked about eliciting stress and anxiety, but it can be a great coping skill. And then once maybe they get if they feel like they have more practice or skills or just doing it more often, it can become more natural, even if it's coloring or using it as a coping skill. It's also great for challenging rigidity and then increasing self-esteem for younger kids. I feel like the teenagers especially get a lot more judgmental and compare, but kind of referencing back to what I said about like the macaroni necklace, like this would be one of those examples, like look what I made. And then I feel like most of my kids, maybe under 10 that I've worked with, love to just run and show their parents what they've worked on, which would be a really great connector for parents and the family work that you do, because kids will be more likely to share, hey, I created this, versus, oh, I feel really anxious and scared and sad. So just using it to your advantage. And then often, let's say if I work with a kiddo, I'll see them for half of the time in the beginning, and then I could bring in the family for the other half, where the kiddo is able to work on the project, talk about it first and feel comfortable with me, and then, okay, what parts do you want to share? What are you not comfortable sharing? Or I'll invite, hey, I think this would be really great for next family session. Can we bring it in? And it also gives some structure. So that open format, just tell me how you're feeling, tell me what you like. You know, just having it really broad can be really difficult for some younger population. And I think this gives them some parameters to work with or a guide. And so in art, again, can break language barriers in young children. So limited language skills, if they have delays, just don't have insight, awareness, emotional intelligence, all of those things, art is a really great medium for that. So here's a pretty intense example of an art prompt. Now, I did this in an individual session, so the only prompt was draw your inner critic. And this girl, she's obviously very artistic, she has a lot of ability, but verbally very, very guarded, very scared, most time, very anxious, had a really hard time being open. So, but I just knew this about her, that she had this ability. And so it was like, okay, well, what does your inner critic look like? That's it, the only prompt. No right or wrong answer. And so when she brings this back to me to work on, again, like I can't interpret it. I can look at it and maybe see things to me that are really important and stand out, but I'm going to leave it to her to explain, you know, what does she find to be important about this, what feelings came up for her, and try to leave my interpretations aside. So as we went over this, you know, we talked about, okay, show me your inner critic. And she actually focused more on the OCD stuff that she had going on. So for her, this was really present, where maybe I would have guided the session into, you know, self-esteem and eating disorder and body. And for her, it was like, that was secondary. And so we got to spend more time to what was important for her. And then also here in the very bottom, that was just like her having a normal interaction with someone who's saying, hey, how are you feeling? And she says, fine. And then all this stuff was going on under the surface. So, and this is something you can come back to several times in a session and really be able to, you know, look at different pieces. And I think the most important part is just like what feelings came up while you were creating this. So what feelings come up now, like while you look at it. And another alternative to this method would be, I think it's either like create your superhero or the best, like an alter ego of you. So whereas your inner critic could be this nasty monster like she depicted, you can have them split the paper or do it on the other side, and maybe what would be the superhero version of you. So this would, as you could tell, would look a lot different, and someone might really struggle with being able to even access, like, I have no idea. I don't know where to start. I don't have any strengths. I don't have any talents. I don't have any superpowers. Like, I don't know what to do with any of this. So like I said, it's all great information, and then you can just go from there. So I have some resources that I'll go over for a couple of minutes, and I think I left a couple things off, but I'll talk about it. So if you want to know more about the adolescent brain and the child brain, which I think can be really helpful when you're explaining to family members just like what's going on inside a kiddo's mind, and help parents get better insight, instead of saying, well, like I even heard just this morning a parent saying, well, I thought you were just being dramatic because you weren't getting your way. And these books really help talk about the science and neuroscience behind what goes on developmentally. It's a great resource for clinicians as well. So my go-to is kind of Dr. Daniel Siegel, The Whole Brain Child. This has actually a lot of pictures. I would recommend it for families to read too. And just saying like little scenarios he'll put in there of, oh, if this happens, this is probably what's going on in their brain. These are some things that you can say in response that are non-judgmental or meet them developmentally where they are, and can help foster more understanding. And then for the teenage brain, which is really even more complicated, it shows, look, the adolescent mind is 12 to 24. So we're talking about young adults as well, and it goes through that transition of just the brain changes, and I think that can be really helpful as well for parents or caregivers and family members to see even the young adults where they're saying, oh, you're 18 now, you should, why are you acting this way? And this kind of breaks it down into, well, their brain's not as developed, and these are the processes going on. And of course, Dr. Gary Landreth for play therapy. This is a real intro to play, just about play techniques. And if you're interested in becoming a registered play therapist, there are some institutions that provide it, like on college campuses, seminars, workshops. Well, I think there's always the play therapy conference, which, of course, everything that's going on now, they've moved that, but you can access the Association for Play Therapy if you're interested in learning more. They do have just CEUs and education and more training on sand tray. That would be useful for your practice. And like I said, I would never suggest going full play therapist mode in your practice if you're not trained to do so, because I think people don't realize how much process actually happens when you're with a kid and you're using the active listening and reflecting, using those techniques with specific toys in mind that can bring up all kinds of feelings and emotions. And a lot of children they'll recreate their world through play. And that could be something you could even see just with the kids repeat things that they've heard. So they'll kind of play out their processes that are going on that they're trying to figure out and understand. So it would be really beneficial just to have extra specialized training on that end, just so that you know what to expect. Let's say if you do run into something like that in the play setting. And I did not include a link for, I believe it's if you want to be a sand play therapist, but if you Google sand play therapy, Jungian, they have a whole website that you can access and a ton of trainings. And I know people get really, really into the sand and play. It can be kind of addicting, like collecting little miniatures and figuring out, what works best with your practice. But like I showed before with, can I go back? Some of these, here we go. Some of the toys and miniatures, these would be standard things that you would want to keep in your office, or if you don't have access to a full playroom. And just integrating this into your everyday practice working with eating disorders. I would highly recommend this one right here that I use, that gets a lot of use. And even just sitting in my office when we're not doing a sand tray or play, it gets used and noticed. So it leads to good conversation. So I think I just have some references there, and we can leave it open for questions. Or
started doing questions.
Oh no, okay.
If you want to just do down on the chat right there.
Right.
Perfect. If you just want to go down.
Where do I go? Yeah, perfect. Okay.
Scroll up. I think people have been putting it.
Oh no. Okay, sorry, I'm going to look at some of these questions and see if I've missed anything. Okay. So I have, usually a patient would overestimate their size, but if a patient underestimates a measurement during the string activity, how do you handle that processing wise? Great question. I've actually never had that happen. I've had it really close to the actual size, which was okay. But I would wonder, let's say if they do underestimate, you can just talk about, were they nervous? Like a lot of times they're like, I'm just so nervous that you're going to judge me, or I'm nervous that I'm going to get it wrong, or maybe they're manipulating what the outcome could be, or I think maybe they just still don't see themselves correctly. So we would kind of go into the area of challenging that your view is distorted, you can't see yourself correctly, and then processing, well, what's coming up for you right now? And so I would just stay in the here and now and go with that. That answered it. So where did you find the exercise equipment miniatures? I had the play therapy conferences. I've been gifted things too, because people know that I like to collect them. But play therapy conferences, they will sell a lot. There's, I believe, sand or playtherapytoys.com, I think is one. And even if you just Google, there's images on Pinterest that come up. If you look up dollhouse miniatures, that can also be a really great resource. Let me see. Oh. Okay. Are there any suggestions for how to implement these interventions in the current COVID climate? Oh, wow. Great question. So I would assume that if you're not doing it face-to-face, let's say if you're in outpatient setting, right now there's a lot of great resources for printables that you can send via email and have, say, like a parent give to their child, where they can fill it out, they can color, they can work on it. I've seen, people, they have the puppets are really common in play therapy. So of course you can have your puppets just like on screen like I'm doing right now. And you just have to be creative, and you have access to the toys. So obviously you couldn't do a sand tray virtually, but using the same methods, like now you're invited into their home. So, hey, can you show me what stuffed animals you have there? And instead, like I did one just the other day about the worry doll. So instead of making a worry doll, we can't make it together. She had a stuffed dog. So we just changed it to, okay, that's your worry dog. And then why don't you tell the worry dog your worries? And we kind of processed it that way. So just kind of thinking on the fly and accessing your own inner child and being creative. And the next one says, do you have examples of body image or self-esteem journal prompts? Well, I guess I will think of some off the top of my head. I have a lot. I really tailor mine to what's going on with the client. Probably one of my favorite things to do is to not really plan ahead in that. I just see what themes are coming up. But let's say if a client is coming to you for their eating disorder and they're just like, I can't stop comparing. I look at my friends, I'm looking at their social media, I'm embarrassed, I can't go swimming with them. All I'm doing is looking at my friends. So I think that just gives you the evidence right there. So, okay, that's an area that we really need to work on. So let's, journaling. So what feelings come up, when you're with these friends? How would you like to feel instead? And then kind of transitioning them to the problem solving a little bit. So what do you think it would take to get you to not compare one day? What might that be like? And doing some fantasy or storytelling, I think, is a really a good intervention that I like to just have them create stories about someone else and how they would manage it and then apply it to themselves. I have a body image group that I run where the girls don't know who Dear Abby is anymore, but it's like a advice column. And so I'll have them just write out, I'm struggling with this, and this is how it's affecting me. And then they get to anonymously give advice and write on the other girls' papers of what they would do. So it's really easy for them to access that for other people. So I would have them consider, doing it for someone else, and then how would you apply this to your own life? I'm sure that I have a bunch more that I can't really access right now or can't think of. Is that it?
If anybody has any more questions, feel free to remain.
Yeah, and if you guys have any more questions, we've got a couple minutes. Yeah. I feel like I ran through some of that. Make sure I didn't miss any. Okay. Okay, well, it looks like that might be it. I really appreciate you guys taking time and sharing today with me. Thanks so much. Little bird chirping.
Thank you guys for joining in today. We look forward to connecting with you guys soon. Please let us know if there's anything that we can do for you, any of you.